Okay, so let's go ahead and I don't want to tell you too much right now, but I will briefly introduce myself, and then we're going to go right into a simulation. I am Leah Slick Driscoll. I teach 7th through 12th grade social studies at the Meskwaki Settlement School, and this will be the beginning of my 9th year teaching there with my tribe. So in my own language, Menwi Gishagi Ho Wasusa Nedashis, that means my name is Wasusa. And I'm from the Meskwaki Settlement in Tama, Iowa. And so that's kind of, when I do this activity with my students, it's something you could do with adults, with teachers, you could do it with students. I don't tell them anything. Like, I don't tell them anything even about what our unit's gonna be about. I just say, we're gonna play a fun game today. It's gonna be like some of the movies that you've watched recently, some of the popular movies that you've watched, and that's all you need to know for now. So go ahead and take your sheet that I passed out, and what we're gonna do right now is go ahead and draw a 2-minute picture of what it looks like if you were standing in your yard looking at your home. So the home that you and your family, or if you're a college student, you know, don't put your college apartment, put your home. Like, where do you go for the holidays? Where do you go that's meaningful to you? Okay, so on to the second part of this. At the bottom, it says you get 2 minutes to make a drawing of something that symbolizes your hometown, the place where it's close to your heart. It could be that you've lived in a place for 30 years and you just recently moved and you really consider your home that other place. Whatever place you love, that's your home, that's what you should draw. Could be like the water tower, it could be like welcome to this town, could be a place that symbolizes that special hometown or that home place for you. Whatever it is, you want to draw in the bottom half of your paper. All right, so next, we're going to pretend like we are students in a classroom, and there was just an announcement over the intercom that there's a national emergency. The office has asked every teacher to turn on their TV and watch a special broadcast. Do I have everybody's sheet up here? Oh, okay. Okay. We're going to watch a special broadcast that's being sent all over the United States. It's a special announcement from the president and the major heads of state. So I come to you today from MSNBC, CNN. I have the president here as well as the leaders of our military, and we have some very grave news, Americans. Today, oh, I'm sorry. I just forgot to do something, actually. You need to take your pieces of paper before this step. I'm sorry. You need to take your red pieces of paper, and what you want to do is write on one name on each paper. Who would you take with you in your own personal space shuttle? There's going to be multiple space shuttles leaving Earth. If the Earth was going to be destroyed in an hour, and you had 14 spots guaranteed for people that you get to choose on your space shuttle. One name on each piece of paper.
Just the red?
The red, just the red.
Do you have to count yourself?
No, you do not count yourself. It's just other people who are going to be on your space shuttle. We're going to the space station because the Earth is going to be destroyed, and we're saving these 4 people guaranteed.
It's just 4?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So hopefully no one's going to ask me about their best friends, their boyfriends, or their dogs. That's what I usually get with students, so I tell them it should be your family, but you know. Oh, well, you know there are other space shuttles, and so maybe like your son or daughter has their own and they're going to choose other people. On the next set of sheets, you're going to have your orange sheets. You're going to put one thing on each piece of paper. It's going to be the 4 things that you would take on the shuttle with you. You're allowed to have 4 items, And it doesn't have to make sense. It could be your refrigerator, it could be your car, could be whatever, your gaming system, and we'll assume that we have everything we need to run whatever it is you're bringing. So 4 things, 1 thing on each piece of paper that you prize. You want to make sure it survives the destruction. And that's all you get, other than the clothes on your back. Yep. All right, and last, you have your yellow things that make you happy. What 4 things do you do that just personally make you happy? Maybe it's reading, maybe it's traveling, maybe it's trying gourmet foods, who knows? 1 thing that you love to do as a hobby or for pure enjoyment on each piece of paper. Okay, so now we go back to our emergency news broadcast. My fellow Americans, I have some grave news for you. Every head of state across the world has been contacted by an alien civilization that has actually been here, present on Earth for the last 200 years. What has actually happened that we have been unaware of as humans is that 200 years ago, two different groups of aliens landed on the Earth, and in order to hide themselves from us, alien civilization A submerged themselves, we're going to pretend like this is much farther north, in the ice of the North Pole, and alien civilization B submerged itself in the ice of the South Pole. And these 2 competing alien civilizations have been scouring the galaxy for a place where they can grow crops for their growing populations. Their planets have become overpopulated. They want a place where some of their own kind can resettle. And the number 1 thing they're looking for is fertile soil. So they both landed here roughly around the same time 200 years ago. They've been fighting in their own ways with each other for the last 200 years, and we have had no idea that they were even here. So they clearly have ways of fighting that we don't even, understand. So we can assume that in some ways they have some technologies that we do not have since they arrived 200 years ago. And alien civilization B has finally been defeated. Alien civilization B claimed the Eastern Hemisphere for themselves, and alien civilization A had claimed the Western Hemisphere. But now that this defeat has happened, alien civilization B is leaving. Alien civilization A is now free to do what they came here to do, and that is to get the most fertile places on Earth. They're going to start with the Russian plain. They're going to start in East Africa, and they're going to start here on the Great Plains. And Iowa is kind of the heart of where they want to start. So the first thing that's going to happen is that we have seen their weaponry. We have seen that they are capable of destroying a very large place in a matter of seconds. They have destroyed the islands of Hawaii completely. They no longer exist because we did not believe that they could defeat us so easily. They have committed this complete destruction. So what we have agreed to is that we will remove the people from Illinois, Iowa, and southern Wisconsin first. We will be removed to an area right here that the aliens consider to be less fertile. And eventually, all humans will be removed. The aliens promise to treat us humanely. They promise to provide us with food and medical care. They promise that if we surrender peacefully and don't fight against them, that they will not kill us. And they will teach us, they can actually get about 100 times more growth and crop from an acre than we can. And so they have promised to educate us for our own benefit. So they do have disdain for fossil fuels. They couldn't imagine how we could destroy our Earth the way that we have been with such short-sightedness. So they do absolutely insist that we cannot use fossil fuels in our leaving of Iowa and going to what we formerly called Arizona, New Mexico. They've set aside a place that straddles the border. And so we do have to walk incrementally. So we need to put our people that we're taking with us, our possessions, and our hobbies into our hand. They are taking over our cities tonight in Iowa. We can only bring these things with us. So you need to get up and get in line right here. What we're going to do is take a quick look, find your home and your hometown. You're going to say goodbye to it because they are going to level it tonight. It will no longer exist. So go ahead and maybe get in a line. Yeah, whatever works. And file this way and then go back to your seat once you've had a chance to say goodbye to your home and your hometown. I'm going to be the alien commander, talking to my little communicator to my friends on the home planet as you're walking by. Okay, so go ahead and take a last look at your home and then go ahead and sit down. Oh my gosh, Ernie, you should see this fertile land. You will not believe how many of our kind we can bring in here. We are going to just thrive here. This soil is rich and black and moist. It's incredible. And these poor little humans, you know, they have been growing things, but not nearly to its potential. We are going to help them so much. Like, they have no idea what we have to teach them. They have no idea, like, the world that we're going to make here, because they have been living in kind of a wilderness, really. They've really actually kind of been destroying things. So we're going to fix it. We're going to help them learn things that will actually make them better for it. We are going to do so much here. You should come and bring your whole family. Can talk to my folks, bring them too. You know, this is just such an incredible opportunity for us. Okay, so we are leaving Iowa. We're just going to say that it's right here, or right here. So we are on a journey. We're walking. We've gotten to the border of Missouri, and we realize that the aliens have a different concept of food than we do. They have given us food, as they promised, but it's not what humans would consider food. It's kind of like a little black gelatin bar, and we don't really know what it's made out of, but people feel pretty hungry. Even though they're able to keep their energy up, they don't feel very good. And the aliens have a sickness that is clearly communicable to humans. One of the first things that happens as we're traveling through Missouri, we've been traveling for about 3 weeks now, is that our youngest person in each family passed away from this illness. Even though they tried, they sent physicians out to help us, that is what's happened. So you need to crumple up your youngest person. So we are feeling really low right now because we feel like the aliens didn't intentionally give us this disease, but it's spreading wildly throughout our community, and it's now affected nearly every family. And so the rest of us are just kind of worried about our remaining loved ones. We're trying to make sure we all have enough food. We feel like maybe if we had human food, maybe we would have been able to fight off the disease more successfully. So we try to trade with the people in Missouri, and now we're getting to the border of Kansas. But they know that they're kind of next. They're hoarding food, they're hoarding medical supplies, they see what's happening to us. They are willing to trade with us a little bit because they feel bad for us. They know about the deaths that have happened, but they also kind of have to look out for themselves because they know that soon they're going to be removed on this walk as well. So to a limited extent, each of us has been able to trade off one item of value. So choose an item of value that you're going to trade to the people of Kansas. With this item, we're going to buy better food from the people of Kansas. We're going to buy some extra medicines, and we're going to buy some wood where we can build wagons to sort of put people that are older or younger or not doing so well in, because we don't have enough resources to do that for everyone. So we have lost one person and one possession at this point. We're going to keep walking. The aliens, the alien military personnel are following with us, making sure that we don't try to escape. There have been some people that have been eliminated, killed on the way for resisting. But the rest of us are kind of in a state of shock still over what's happening. And so we continue on our journey. As we get to the border of Oklahoma, we know that we're about, a state and a half away from our destination. We're maybe right about here. We realize that a lot of our elderly people, or even just people, over 60 in general, who maybe are not even elderly but are, not able to walk 20 miles day after day after day, are really starting to decline. They're becoming dehydrated, more and more tired, and we don't have enough wagons. Some of them start to sicken. The nights are getting a little bit colder now as it's getting into winter. We don't have enough blankets and enough shelter sometimes. And so our oldest person has passed away, the oldest person in the group. You also know that you don't have time to do fun things anymore because you're trying to help the remaining people out of your loved ones survive. You need to crumple up 2 of your hobbies. Every once in a while, the aliens permit a few hours or a half a day of rest, but really we just walk and sleep. We've been traveling for about 2.5 months now, and we are nearly there. So we do arrive in the human territory. This is what the aliens call it. They call it the human territory. And more aliens have started to come in from the home planet. They have started to also remove other people from the heartland where they can farm. People from Ohio, people from Indiana, people from, verging on Nebraska and Kansas now. So we hear tales of other people traveling towards the human territory. There are different languages and cultural groups on alien planet A. And one of these planets, or one of these groups on the planet, have negotiated with the aliens that have taken over the United States, the group, and they have redrawn the border. This is going to be District or Area 1, and this is going to be Area 2. So now if you have relatives that live in this southern belt, they technically live in another nation now. This is a border that the aliens have created. So how many people in here do have relatives or friends that live in these states? Okay, so yeah, you might have to get permission from the aliens if you ever were able to travel, or if they ever wanted to travel, because they created a new border that didn't exist before. And so we finally arrive in the human territory. We realize that they've dropped off building supplies. They have dropped off more of the black gelatin food. They have given us tools where we can dig wells. But we pretty much have to rebuild our lives with the people and the things that we have left from scratch. And it takes us, several years. Over the course of several years, we have several different communities that emerge, and more people start coming in. After a period of 5 years, every human from the United States is now in the human territory, with the exception of 2 locations. Up here, we had a group of humans. We have a group of humans that made some friends with the aliens that were more sympathetic to humans as they saw more and more humans dying. A lot of humans died from the disease. A lot of humans died from the exhaustion of the removal, from dehydration, from fighting even. A lot of communities refused to move, and they took their chance and fought. And some of them died, and some of them, such as this one, they actually got a hold of some of the aliens' weapons and had alien allies who were on their side, and they successfully fought the alien military to a standstill, and they got them to agree to allow this community of humans to stay. So they are allowed to stay on their own lands and live the best they can within the confines of their own territory. The other thing that aliens did, the aliens negotiated with humans, is that they said, we realize we've taken all of your lands and we want you to eventually be part of our civilization and feel like you belong. And we realize that, and I'm just gonna, we're just gonna say that this is Washington, D.C. They have left us this little area of monuments that they realize are important to us. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Arlington Cemetery, the major monuments, the major museums. They allowed 15,000 humans to stay there and keep that area up. And they promised never to take it from us. They promised that it would be our sacred area, that humans could apply with good behavior to visit that once in their lifetime. And that's kind of the deal right now. So the bad news is that at this point, 90% of all humans have passed away. From sickness, from fighting the aliens, and from the removal. And so we started out with about 320 million people in the United States, and we now have about 32 million that live in the human territory from all different parts of the United States. And so, what are some of the difficulties we're going to have when we know that 90% of all humans die? What are some of these difficulties that we might experience in this community?
Genetic bottlenecking.
Yeah, do we have enough partners for all age-appropriate partners for everyone? What else? What other problems are we going to have? Are we going to be able to live our lives the way we always have? What's going to happen to our identity as humans? Like, will we be able to, what things are going to be affected by this 90% loss and removal to what for most of us is going to be a foreign place? Culture.
The way to support ourselves.
How will we support ourselves? Because we might not have a high school, or a middle school the way that we know it, right? And maybe there are a lot of teachers there. They don't need everyone to be a teacher, to the small population of children that are not left. What else?
Considering I was selected because of farming. Farming would be possible, at least not as we know it.
Right. They say that they have given us seeds. They've given us some tools. They've tried to teach us their form of farming, and they actually kind of like talk about us as if we've never farmed before, because they consider us they consider us so far below them. They don't consider our type of farming to be real farming. And so the only way that we can get food is to grow our own food, or to eat their black gelatin bars, which they promise to provide us into infinity for the loss of our lands. So, yeah, these are definitely some things to think about. So we have rebuilt. We have probably 15 towns, very large towns, and the aliens have actually discovered this mineral here in the California desert. It's completely, we've always thought it was stupid and useless, so we've never done anything with it. But it's something located in the sand that they can power their ships with. And so they wondered, since in New Mexico there's a lot of sand, they've been doing some testing, and they found in this area right here, that mineral is just abundant. And so we've been here for 15 years, we've rebuilt, but now the aliens are saying, I'm sorry, we didn't realize the mineral was there. We need you to move again. We're going to move you to this place in California, in the desert, not by the ocean, if you're imagining that. It's going to be right here in the mountains and the deserts. All people that live here are going to have to move to the purple area now, because they've already extracted the resource. They consider it kind of useless to them. And they want this. And quite frankly, we have to make a decision now. So you need to get with 2 other people and form a group. You're going to be the people representing your town. And whatever decision you make, the people of your town, as you're going to be the city council or the governor of your town, whatever, they've agreed to do whatever you guys decide. Some people are referencing this victory here and saying, I have some alien friends too, and they really feel bad about what the government has decided to do. Like, they might be willing to help us. They might be willing to give us some weapons. Maybe we could make a deal with the aliens if we can fight for them. Or are you going to decide to move because you don't want to be annihilated? The aliens have said they will eliminate any town that doesn't agree to move in the orange area. And all of us are from the orange area. So you have to make a decision, discuss the pros and cons of either, staying and fighting or moving peacefully like last time. So go ahead and take 2 minutes, find groups of 3 or 4. So just to be clear, the aliens have said you will move or you'll die. I hear this negotiation word. They refuse that. We want that resource. You will move, or if you refuse to sign the paper, you will die. We will send in the military. So that is where we're at right now. Okay. We'll call you group number 1. What did you guys decide?
We didn't. It sounds like we're going. We're going.
Are there people in your group that do not want to go? Is there so how do we say? Okay, decided to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what were the reasons that you decided to go easily?
Preserve the species. No other option.
And how about you guys?
We decided to stay fight.
Okay, and what were your reasons?
Because when we figured that the chance of making it to the new location is just about as great as winning a fight with them. So might as well take a quick way out.
So you're gonna die. There's a good chance you're gonna die anyways.
Yep.
We're going to die.
So you might as well die with dignity and pride. Okay. Group number 3. Are you guys 3 a group? Okay.
We're going to purple, man. Just
You're going to.
we're hoping that some of our people will survive and
Okay.
maintain our culture.
Okay. Okay. And
We're saying we want to ruin the resource that they want.
okay.
Yeah.
Wait, you said you're gonna go, but you're
No,
you're staying.
We're gonna destroy
But you're gonna destroy the
poisons. We're gonna do whatever we can to
She
do.
told me that we couldn't negotiate.
Right. Okay.
Was the land good with the shovels or did it good conflict?
And what was your reason for wanting to stay rather than removing?
It's not anybody, they don't make them know that they're in a fight.
Okay.
Okay, we have less people now and this is our less.
Okay. You're gonna go, okay, what was your reason?
Where there is life, there is hope.
Okay, all right. All right. Were there any groups where people disagreed strongly and said, you know, you guys can do that, but I'm going to do this? Okay, that can happen sometimes. So, those of you who decided to fight, group number 1, or group number 2, and group number 4, you did each lose a person in the battle. But group number 2 gets to stay. So, group number 2 gets to stay. And group number 4 fought and lost a person, but they still had to go. Okay. So, you do have to crumple up another person.
Then we have to go in.
Yep. Yeah. So those of you who decided to go, group number 1, you lost a person on a journey. Group number 3, you also lost a person on the journey. And group number 5, another disease took a person from you. So,
We didn't have healthcare.
well, they did promise to provide health care, but the doctors were not able to save everyone. So, in this little green area right here is group number 2 that was allowed to stay. So, okay. They are kind of, actually we'll get to this after the activity. Okay, so those of you who, the other 4 groups that are here in the purple area, let's just fast forward 15 years into the future. We've rebuilt. We're doing okay now. Our population is rising up a little bit. The current situation, though, after more removals, is that we only have 5% of our human population left. It's now down to about 16 million people. So, for this 30 years where the aliens have been focusing on getting our land and getting that precious resource, they've kind of like stayed out of our business. We have continued to teach our children whatever human languages we speak. We have continued to live with our religions, whatever they might be, or maybe not a religion. We've continued to kind of try to live our lives, continuing our culture, as a couple people have said. But now the aliens have the land, they have the resources, they've pretty much extracted it from almost everywhere except the East Coast, which they don't really think it's there because it's mainly found in sandy areas. And so they now feel bad about what has happened. They feel bad that 95% of the human population has died. And they pride themselves on being a democratic nation. They pride themselves on promoting human rights. And they feel like humans, out of all the living beings in Area 1, are living in dire poverty. We don't have the ability to make a living the way that we used to. We have to sort of rely on whatever they drop off. If a human tries to leave the confines of the human territory, they're considered a hostile person who's out to attack the aliens at this point in time. So the aliens have some major cities that have grown up. So they've got some major cities forming, especially in farm areas. So they have established universities, they've established, the major institutions of society. And now they say to us that they want our children to have an opportunity to exist in their culture. So what they are saying now is that they need every child from age 5 to 18 to go with them to these major cities where they have set up special schools to teach our children their language, which is not a human language. It's a series that sounds to the human ear like kind of screeches, whistles, pops. We don't understand, but they have a special electronic translator in which they use as interpreters, and they eventually learned our language. They're able to speak it. Very few humans are able to speak their language fluently, though, even after studying it for years and years. And so they say that they want our children to have equal rights eventually. But without the education that the aliens need in their own civilization, our children wouldn't have that opportunity. And so they roll out a law after we've been removed for about 30 years. And they say every child will go whether we want them to or not. And we can either surrender our children in a way that's non-traumatic to our children, or they will send in the military to get our children. And people may die. So they send a transport to all of our cities within the human territory, within the purple area. They try, because the green area is pretty sovereign and they continue to be pretty, they actually insisted upon paying the aliens for this piece of land so that they owned it outright. They said, we don't want you to tell us that we won this. We want to own it outright. This group right here, the aliens build a little boarding school right here about 1 mile outside the boundary. And they say, please send your children to the boarding school. Everybody else, you will send your children to the boarding school or we will send in the military. So our children leave us for about 13 years, and they're in the alien schools. They're immersed in alien culture. They learn the alien language. They are required to convert to the alien religion, which is completely different from anything we've ever heard of. And when they come back, they have difficulty speaking a human language. They really kind of don't remember it because they've been removed from it for about 13 years. And so the other bad thing is that at the school, they teach our children that everything human is backwards, savage, bad, and something to be ashamed of. The aliens are humanoid. They look like us, similar, but they have like a yellow tinge to their skin, and they have neon green hair, okay? So our children come back to us, and some of them do want to learn human culture and learn human language, but it's very difficult for them. And some of them never want to come back to us. They consider us, a low form of life. They don't want to be like us. They want to just move straight to the alien city and start their job. We have discovered that humans can marry aliens and have children with them. We are compatible, which surprised all of us. And our children, some of our children, they never come home because they choose not to. They marry somebody in the alien civilization. They buy yellow foundation. They dye their hair neon green. And they pretend like that's what they are and have always been. And they never tell their children that they were once, human as a child. So we do have roughly half of our children that come home, though. So what are some issues we're going to have when these children come home? And all of us are now, middle-aged. Our children are now adults when they're coming home. What are we going to be thinking? Actually, I have a little reflection sheet for this that I usually give my students. Let's do check-in number 1. What are some problems we are going to have now that our kids are coming home? And these are the kids that decided to come home rather than just skip us completely. Okay, so what are some of the things we're going to have to do to make sure that human culture does continue and human languages continue? What are we going to have to do now that we have these kids back home that have been gone, well, adults back home that have been raised in an alien institution, not by parents, but by personnel at the alien institution from age 5 on. What are we going to have to do to try to recover from this? Because it's not going to stop, it's going to continue. The aliens say this is the policy from now on. The next generation, your grandkids, they're going to go at age 5. So we're going to have to think of a long-term plan. What do we do now that they're back home?
We're going to have some kind of reunion that celebrates human culture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're going to really kind of have to convince them that human culture is even worthy because they've been so immersed in something else that has just kind of re-socialized them to think of us as less. So yeah, what else?
We might have to establish like preschools.
For 18-year-olds?
To ensure, for like 3-year-olds to 5-year-olds, they know whatever language, human languages, and religion, if that's important to the people.
Right.
Yeah.
No one's ever said that before. That's awesome. I never thought of that, but you would probably want to be more intentional about teaching your toddlers language and culture because you know you're going to lose them for 13 years. So whatever you're able to teach them is going to be what they have to hold on to as their identity in the face of very, very violent assimilation. So, anything else?
Well, I mean, probably even try to set them up with the mind frame that you shouldn't accept those things. I think it would be busy kind of contouring them or whatever it is.
Like warning them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To know that those things are bad. They need to maintain those things.
And the question is, will your adult children, who are the parents of these grandchildren, will they allow you to? Because do they really believe that is the question? Some of them may, and some of them may not. Some of them may feel like the future in human survival is to assimilate and be like the aliens. So you're going to have a divided community. It's not like everyone in the community is going to be working towards this common goal. It's going to be this group of people, this group of people, this group of people to varying degrees. And then arguments and division within the small population that's left. So yeah, it's going to be a nightmare, really. And so some other things that are just happening now that like these two cultures are evolving together, humans and aliens. The aliens now have a very thriving sort of popular culture going on. And they have, I'm sorry. So I failed to mention earlier that our former friends and relatives who live down here, they also have a human territory. We're human territory number 1, they're human territory number 2. And in human territory number 2, things are not as good as they are in human territory number 1. We have slightly better conditions. We have more food. We have a few more resources. We've been established a little bit longer. And so a lot of our friends and relatives, they miss us. They want to see family that they haven't seen for a long time, but they also have heard about how much better it is here. And so they cross the border, and many of them, die in the journey across this area. Some of them are arrested and deported by the aliens back to human territory number 2. And some of them make it, but then they have to constantly hide whenever the aliens come in for checks. So the aliens have decided where the border is. The aliens have decided who gets to be defined as humans in Area 1 and who belongs in Area 2. The aliens have decided what our lives are going to be like. And that's difficult for us because this could be your son and daughter-in-law. This could be your sister and brother who live in California. And so, in the alien popular culture, one of the most popular movie or video genres is the story of their landing and they were destined to do this. It was foretold in their religion that this was going to happen, and it was inevitable in their mind that this happened, and they make all kinds of movies about it. So their biggest hero is a guy that the humans have nicknamed Ernie Wayne. And he goes around fighting humans, and any human that's reluctant to stay in the human territory, he shoots them up. He's huge in their world. Like every little kid has a costume of this Ernie Wayne character. And Ernie Wayne talks about humans, and he really, really, really hates the humans in this green area. Constantly movies about Ernie Wayne fighting the natives in the green area. That's the biggest seller. And so the problem is that in these movies, human women, for some weird reason that we really quite can't figure out, are often depicted as kind of like, exotic dancers or prostitutes. That is how all human women are depicted. And we can't quite figure it out. But the bad thing is that it's led to, because human women are objectified in this way and always treated as sexual objects, it has led to epidemic rates of sexual violence against human women by alien males. And so the thing is, in an alien court system, we do not have our own court system in the human territory. If somebody gets in trouble, they get taken to this city right here. And an alien judge and jury will try the case and decide, did the human woman get a scientific rape kit done? Is there enough proof to prove that the alien man raped her? And in 85% of the cases, there isn't, they decide. So the alien government declines to prosecute 85% of all cases of rape against human women, especially if they happen in the human territory. So there's a whole slew of alien men who target human women right on the border or in the human territory. It's virtually guaranteed that they will not be prosecuted for that crime. And so among humans, there's kind of a depression and a despondency about this, because we cannot form our own court systems that the aliens will recognize to sort of deal with these crimes the way that we used to in our own society. And so in these Ernie Wayne movies, human women are often depicted in, skirts up to here, all kinds of ways that sort of label them as objects, and it just kind of continues. Human men are often depicted as raving lunatics, virtually like foaming at the mouth, with shotguns. And they're just complete lunatics that can't be reasoned with. It's almost like a lion attacking you. You're not going to stop and talk to it because it can't be reasoned with. That's kind of how Ernie Wayne treats the humans who fought against the alien invasion. And even human children, they constantly see media where human women are depicted that way and human men are portrayed that way. And the aliens have sports teams. And there was a time when the aliens offered rewards for humans that had run away from the removal parties, and they would offer other aliens money for human skins. So they would have stores, and on the wall they would have, various, you could bring it in for a bounty. You would hang up the human skin on the wall, and you would get paid for it. If it was a piece of skin big enough to prove that you actually killed the human and tracked them down. And so, some of the nation's capital, let's just say the aliens' nation capital is right here. They are called the human skins. And there's a slew of other schools and sports teams in all these major green cities that have names. Some of them are lions, tigers, jaguars, seahawks, eagles. Really the only intelligent life form, though, that has a name on these mascots is humans. You don't ever see alien groups depicted. The reason they chose humans is because humans are clearly savage and monstrous. They are something to be feared, like the lion. Otherwise, you would see alien names up there too, but it's just humans. And the other thing is that now they have opened up the human territory. They finally say, after we've been here for 50 years, that we are free to leave the human territory and move to their cities. They will help us, get jobs, do whatever. And so now we have a choice. We live in a state of poverty that nowhere else in the Area 1 would even understand the depth of our poverty. And so the problem is, a lot of you mentioned preserving human culture, like how will we make sure it continues? If, as a young parent or grandparent, you could decide to stay with your kids on the human territory, and they're guaranteed to be able to speak a human language with people around them at the grocery store, the library, whatever other institutions we have. But you're going to have a tough time finding a job, especially if you have an education from one of the alien colleges. There just aren't enough jobs on the human territory for educated people to be able to make a living and support their family. Most people in the human territory earn around $8,000 a year. If you move to the city, you could earn $80,000 a year. So you have a choice. Which one is more important? Level of your socioeconomic status, or your human children learning human culture and language. So check-in number 2. What do you think? What are you going to decide? Suicide rates are very high in the human territory. Alcohol and substance abuse is very high because of the level of depression and loss. The devastation, basically. We have 5% of our population left. Do you want your kids, positive and negative, to be there, or do you want to be in the city? Okay, how many people chose to stay in the human territory? Okay. So your 2 families will then be able to continue to speak a human language, practice a human religion. You're going to do the best you can. Everybody else is going to move to the city, and in the city, your child goes to a school that it has curriculum. It talks about what happened between humans and aliens. Your suicide rate for human children in the city is twice as high as it is on the human territory, because they don't have that protection of their identity. They don't have their access to their religion. They don't have access to their language. They're actively still being taught in school that the only thing that matters is the alien civilization, and that human civilization is something from the past. It's something that's kind of prehistoric, something that's only from 50 years ago before real technology came in. So that's your child's education. And so that's the problem. It's kind of like a catch-22. What do you do? And so one last thing that's going to happen before we're going to take a break and this simulation ends is that they have been searching for the resource, and unfortunately, right underneath Arlington and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, they found a whole big load of it. They cannot dig around it or they can't preserve those 2 things at all. They are going to take the resource. That's what they've told us anyways. even though they say that they're big human rights advocates. They say they sent us a letter to meet with them about it, but that we just didn't respond in the human territory. Our leaders, we just didn't respond. Like we didn't care. So they decided to pass it. And they're gonna move in with their machinery and take it. So a group of at least 1 million humans travels to DC, and they stand in front of the tomb, and they stand around the perimeter of Arlington, and more humans, definitely these guys are sending humans. They're sending humans to stand up and protest, and they're trying to get their allies in the alien media to watch and see what's happening at this peaceful protest site. But the aliens do send in paramilitary. They send in police from various parts of the country. And they basically give order after order for humans to remove, that they're going to take it, and that humans have no choice. And then a new alien leader is elected, and he signs off. And so they just dig it up. A lot of humans are injured in the fighting. One human loses their arm. Couple humans lose their eyes. Other people, they have the full force of the alien military on them. And so in the end, it is taken. And so where do we stand now with the aliens? Like, is there trust between us? Like, how are you feeling about this? That's check-in number 3. And check-in number 4, the aliens have decided that the only way we can really have equality with them is to become citizens of their nation. We've been flying the American flag for 60 years, even as we've been removed to this human territory, even in the green area, even in the purple area. And they tell us that their legislature and their president has decided that we are now citizens of the alien nation. And they send us their flags, and they tell us we can take down the American flag, and that we will now, instead of being known as Americans or humans, we will be known just as they are, as aliens, whatever they call their civilization. And we will fly their flag. And if we want to continue to fly the American flag, we can do that, but it will be much lower than the alien flag. The alien flag will be on top. That's check-in number 4. And that, once you're done with that, you can go ahead and go to break. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. In our workshop, we recently did a 2-day workshop with 38 teachers. We were supposed to only have space for 30 teachers because it was renewal credit or whatever, but our website malfunctioned and we ended up having 38 teachers. And our sessions were supposed to end at 5 o'clock on Saturday and 2 o'clock on Sunday. And the first time we met, we didn't end up they're in the middle of the Meskwaki Bingo and Casino. They have rooms. They could have gone and done all this other stuff, but we ended up just they wanted to stay and ask questions. So we always run out of time when it comes time for questions or comments. So I think we're just going to go ahead and get started. They ended up being there till 8 o'clock at night when they were supposed to be done at 5. I kept saying, don't you guys want to go? And and they'd be like, no, if you're willing to stay. So anyways, is anybody willing to share their check-ins? Like something that made you feel pretty strongly on your check-ins?
I was at a class at Mesa Verde last summer with Pueblo, and one of the things that they talked about, and it kind of relates to check-in number 3, about how the two groups are supposed to find commonality if it's possible. And this is not a political statement necessarily, but the one elder that talked to us had said Obama was the only U.S. president to talk to them.
Right.
He traveled out there to the different villages, and then had them come out to D.C.
Right.
And he was the first the first one to do that.
Right,
And then he was concerned going forward that that relationship would not be maintained.
Right. What has happened abroad, and this is also not a political statement, it's simply purely an observation of what has happened. You know, as a primary resource, I can show you millions of things. Every single time in a new country that Republicans elected, we know that half of all of our funding for elderly services, for health, for education will be cut. And in this case, it's been even worse than half. Yeah. It's pretty devastating. But like I said, it's nothing to do with, it's just simply the way that it works. That's just an accepted fact in any country. We all know what's coming once that result. If you look at the map, voting precincts, even in states that are pure red, you get a map of where Native people are in those states, and it's going to be pure blue. In our precinct, 300 and some people voted, and one person voted for Trump out of those 300 and some people. And the next day, all people could talk about is, who do you think it was? Like, who would do that to us?
I was trying to think the other day, what was that poem? It said, they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I kept my mouth shut, and then they came for this.
They came for the communists, they came for the,
Well,
Pastor Nemo.
the rest of, those are people who haven't lived and lived on a reservation and are now, they've come for us.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, any other things from how did you guys feel about number 4? That's usually talked about in the history books, and it's never really unpacked. 1924, natives became citizens. When I first came to the settlement, natives serve in the military. When I first came back from college, after getting my history and Native Studies degree, I completely looked at things differently, just from that intentional education. And I noticed that on our school flags, the American flag was 6 inches higher than the Meskwaki flag. And according to the Constitution, what does the Constitution say about Native nations?
Aren't they supposed to be sovereign entities?
They're completely sovereign. So when you're on the settlement, you're not in Iowa. You are not in the state of Iowa. The police, others cannot enter without permission of Meskwaki people. In the 1830s, the Marshall Court put out a trilogy of rulings. And so imagine this. In our scenario, they at first write a constitution in which the human territory is completely sovereign and we make our own decisions. They're going to compensate us for the lands. We can continue to live as we have to the best of our ability. And then when they want to remove us here, you can't really do that to a completely sovereign nation. France can't decide they want half of Germany. So then France tells Germany, we have more military might than you. So we're going to rule in our own alien court systems that you are domestic dependent nations. So the Supreme Court ruled something that directly goes against what the Constitution of the United States says. The Constitution says that Native nations are completely sovereign nations in which any agreement between them is made through a treaty on both parts. But that ruling is what is enforced today in the American political system, that we are domestic dependent, so that major crimes, this was a ruling in the 1890s, are decided by the federal courts. So if a Native woman is raped on a reservation by a non-Native man, or even by a Native man, we'll say, the most that the court can sentence, a Native court can sentence a perpetrator to is 1 year. And 85% of all cases in non-Native courts and federal courts, they decline to prosecute it, saying that there's not enough evidence. If you're a woman that lives on the Navajo reservation and you're 3 hours from the nearest medical center or the police department, they have the Navajo reservation is larger than 6 of the East Coast states put together. and they have, a fraction of the police officers and resources. If they can't get to you in time to administer a rape kit, and you don't have the money or the resources to drive that distance in the state that you're in, it simply cannot be prosecuted. That person just gets away with it, period. 85% of all cases are not prosecuted. So it's like kind of open season, In Canada, there are 3,000 missing and murdered Native women, and the common response before it became a world issue, before the United Nations started looking at it, before it became widely publicized is, well, she's a Native woman, she's probably just out drunk, she'll be back in a few weeks, don't worry. And so, just declining to prosecute things like that, declining to look into things based on racial assumptions, right? So let's go ahead, what do you think, on this entrance survey, I asked you a question. What is the purpose of teaching Native history? What should your goals be? What do you guys think?
I want my students to see patterns of treatment over time and incorporate those patterns into a discussion of current events. I want them to see multiple perspectives.
Okay. And what's the purpose of that in a democratic nation? What's the difference between education in a democracy and a dictatorship? What's the difference? What are the goals in a democracy?
I think we want to provide students with a wide range of information so that they can make educated decisions.
Exactly. They're the boss of their government, right? They are the force behind it, right? But in a dictatorship, what's the goal? Here's how we train them to think the way we want them to think about how we're an awesome government and how we maintain our power, right? That's a dictatorship. And so when you talk to people, social studies teachers, curriculum directors, there are places in this country that print their own textbooks because they want history portrayed in a certain way. Workers in the fields rather than enslaved people. Or, natives are only in the 1800s and 1700s and only at a few little points in history. And why do you think, what is their reasoning for not teaching those current events? What do you think a lot of people say in those areas?
But it's not important.
It's not important. It's not patriotic. It makes America look bad if we talk about these things. But really, that's more consistent with the education of a dictatorship than it is a democracy. Because here's the thing, I've talked to many, many high school students, and they have a perception, I don't need to vote. Things have been going fine for the last 100 years. A lot of people don't vote. That's totally fine. I don't really know what's going on, Things are going to continue to run just fine if I sit on the couch and do nothing. And so what we teach our kids, when we continue to teach the same history, the same topics over and over about wealthy white men from the 1700s, is that America's been running on autopilot this whole time. Everything's been fine. We've never had a problem. We've got workers in the fields. No problems. And the people that are suffering in our country, they're just lazy. You know what? There's no reason to go out and vote if that's the truth, because everything's going to be just fine. If you want citizens, though, if you want citizens to pay attention and understand that their goal is to be the foundation and the driving force behind their government, that they're responsible for it, they need to know that America is the greatest country in the world, in my opinion, but has made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes that we've had to learn from, and that we didn't correct them on our own. There was a lot of civil rights battles from all kinds of different groups of people, genders, religions, sexual identities, to get where we are today. And in a democracy, that's what we want. We want something we can own and be proud of, and we're responsible if our government does something. And that's what our kids should be learning in school. They should be learning to be critical thinkers, not autopilot. American Patriotism 101. That's destructive to a democracy. That's an oligarchy then, because we just we continue to teach that way. And so when I tell my students in early American history, the very first thing we do is I say, here's your textbooks. We're not going to use them for the first week. I want you to tell me a story. And then they tell me the story of Columbus, anything that they've heard in the past. We've never discussed it before, any source. And sadly, even at the Meskwaki Settlement School in the past, those kids coming up from elementary, when I first got there, they would tell me the story that you would predict. And then I would hand out the primary documents. Here's Columbus's journal. Here is Bartolomé de las Casas's journal. Here's letters from the King and Queen of Spain. Here's the figures on Taino population and what happened in the 15 years that Columbus set up his slavery system, his plantations, cut off hands if they didn't collect enough gold, murdered 95% of the Tainos. And then I asked them the question on their essay, why do we have a holiday? Why is there a holiday in a country that considers itself a democracy that values human rights? And then I say, okay, your test for this unit, you're going to open up your textbook for the first time. And I want you to look at your textbook and what it wrote. I want you to note some things that are different from this primary resource right here that you have. And I want you to tell me why you think they wrote the textbook this way. And then what does that teach the kids? It teaches them, obviously I gave you this book, so there must be some good in this book. Some of this book is great. Some of this book is trash. You just saw trash. You saw an agenda here. And the agenda is the idea that Native America was sparsely populated. No. 100 million people lived in this hemisphere. All kinds of technology, all kinds of mathematics, engineering. The people in the Southwest, who we call the Anasazi, were the first to map out the 18-and-a-half-year cycle of the moon. Because it takes 250 years of mapping that out, engineering, technology. They built 8 cities. But we rarely learn that because that would be counterproductive to the narrative that natives had no technology, were sparsely populated. They deserved to be colonized and invaded and whatever else. So when kids wake up, when you start to teach them something that's different from the old white wealthy males that they've been learning about year after year after year after year, kids label social studies at the bottom of their favorite classes. It's the bottom. They don't sign up for it as an elective typically, unless they have a passion, unless they have an awesome teacher at their school. Typically, no, I'm not going to sign up for that. Government Part 2, no way. Right? So when you teach something that actually causes them to think and wake up and they've never heard this before, and it actually questions what their book says, and you're using primary resources, it's almost like, oh my gosh, this is something that I've never done before. This is completely different. Okay, I wanted to show you in the few minutes we have left, one of the things, the main point that I want you to take away on my part is that there's no point in teaching about the past if you can't tell your kids why it's important today. If you can't explain to them, don't teach them about the War of 1812. If you can't tell them why is it critical for me as a person to know this right now for my life? And it is. For the reasons that we've just discussed, but here's a project. All of my juniors and seniors, actually, 9th and, oh no. Okay. All of them have to do a movie, a desktop documentary, about a modern day Native issue. And the only requirements I give them, you have to have this many pictures, you have to have this many text boxes, you have to create the illusion that this is actually a filmed movie, like a Ken Burns production. You have to set it to music of some sort that's appropriate for the topic. And your goal is to influence people who've never heard of this topic before to want to know more about your topic and to care about it. And you have to use quality resources. So I require them to have 4 academic level articles. I help them if they need help, but they have to read it. They have to use those in the construction of this movie. And so I have a couple. They have to tie it. They have to be detectives. That's their assignment. They have to be detectives, find out when did this problem first start in Native America, and why did it start? Like, where's the roots of this? How is it connected to other people's issues? And that's really the only assignment. They can choose any topic that they can find 4 quality articles on that they're interested in. So I'll show you this one right here. It is, do we have sound? How do we? Oh, okay. How many people have ever heard of Idle No More? Wow, okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about it while we're waiting for the speakers. So in Canada, the Canadian government made a compact with the Native Nations of Canada that anytime they made a law that could potentially threaten their waterways, they would consult with the tribes, and the tribes would have input into that lawmaking and decision-making process. And so there were, I think it says in here, but there were 2,000 plus rivers that were sort of protected by that compact. And then the government of Canada decided to relax its environmental protection, and they were trying to pass a new law that would completely erase that relationship with Native tribes, and they would allow industrial dumping into rivers and stuff, and it would affect the fish. And I mean, a lot of Native nations are still very much like trapping animals, fishing for a lot of their economy and their traditional foods. And so these 3 Native women and 1 non-Native woman decided to respond to this by holding a teach-in Canada, and they called it Idle No More. And so natives from across Canada attended this teach-in, and then they said, go home to your home communities, tell people about this. We're gonna start a peaceful movement to oppose this. And what they would do is they'd go to like major cities, like a major mall, and they'd bring a big drum in never telling them all that this is gonna happen. And they'd send out like text messages to every Native person that they knew in the area. And gosh, it's not Toronto. What's the other big, huge city in Canada?
Montreal.
Montreal.
Okay.
Montreal is 50% Native. I don't know if you know this. 50% of the population of Montreal, Canada is Native. When you call Natives and tell them to show up at the mall so we do something we call a round dance, where they play and sing, and then like everybody else just like dances in a circle. Sometimes it's called the friendship dance. So there were 10,000 natives in the center of this mall, even up on the top, like all doing this round dance, and they were asking other Canadians to join them. And so natives in the United States heard about this, and this spread across the United States. It spread to Central America, it spread to South America, it spread to Australia, South Africa, all over the world, and it was all Idle No More. And so maybe they had different styles of dancing. The Aboriginal people of Australia made a huge website, and it said, welcome to our stolen lands. And then they were dancing, in their own style. The Maori people in New Zealand and on the Pacific Islanders were doing it. It was just like incredible that like what 4 people started spread, because these issues are relevant all over the world. It's still, all these things that people typically think are happening in the past are happening today.
So she woke up from where she was, lying still, saying, I gotta do something about where we're going. Step on the steam train, step out of the driving rain, baby. Run from the darkness in the night.
I don't know if you knew that the Tohono O'odham Reservation right on the border of Mexico and the United States. So the wall went out across their sovereign territory, and they say it's not getting built to these. So it's not getting built on their land. You can see the red area where they are. Some of their people are on the Mexico side. Their reservation stands like in the water. That's what we're doing.
Gotta do something about where we're going. Slip on the steam train, step out of the driving rain, baby. Run from the darkness in the night.
So coming back to like our simulation, imagine if the aliens, you know, in our state of poverty, if the aliens said that they would give us billions of dollars if we would store all of the nuclear waste in the United States on our lands. Because our lands don't have the same laws that the alien lands have that would restrict that. Because we're a sovereign nation, we may not have made laws like that. So we have different rules for our land. So these companies could come to us and say that, and are all humans going to agree that we shouldn't or should? What's it going to do to the small population of people? We could all have, you know, $10 million in our bank account tomorrow if we say yes to store all this nuclear waste. This was an issue facing the Gashute tribe in Utah. They're 30 minutes outside of Salt Lake City. A tribe of 100 people left after everything. Their tribe, you know, had maybe 2% of their population left, and the US government said, you know, we eventually want to move all the nuclear waste to Yucca Mountain in Nevada, but right now those tribes are fighting against that because that's their sacred mountain, and there's a huge aquifer under there, so of course all the scientific community is saying, do not put all the nuclear waste in the United States on top of the biggest aquifer in the United States. Why would you even think that? So there's all this protest going on, and meanwhile they need a place to put it. And so they offer this to the Gashute people and say, we'll give you $1 billion or more to store this on your lands. And then the tribe was torn apart. It's about 50-50. Just tore the community apart with the debate. So like, she's kind of alluding to, you know, this, people think that like Native issues are all in the 1800s, but really it's like happening today. Any questions, comments?
What does your elementary do with, because I know that, how does your elementary tie Native American history in?
Right now, we have, like, the way that our school is structured is every student has to have 1 hour of native or of Meskwaki language a day. And so our culture, we have Meskwaki culture teachers that have every single group except 3. We have a 3-year-old group that's complete immersion. They hear nothing but Meskwaki all day. We have a 4-year-old group, same thing. And then K through 6, they have 1 hour of Meskwaki language. 7 through 12 has 1 hour on the high school side of Meskwaki language every day. And so basically there are tribes that have 20,000 people, like the Pawnee Nation in Oklahoma, whose kids went to boarding school. They have 1 speaker who's 80-some years old left. There are other tribes that have 0, none. Their language is just written somewhere by an anthropologist in the past. Meskwakis, because we didn't go to boarding school, actually the hilarious story is the US government built a boarding school in Toledo. And you know, we were the ones in green. We purchased our own land. Basically, they couldn't compel us because what they did to the other tribes is they would try to send in the military because it's a reservation, and a reservation is where the government assigns you, so the government still considers it its land. but Meskwaki land is ours in a sovereign way. So they couldn't enter with the military. The only thing they could do is say, well, you know how we promised you health care, education, and food in place of your land? And we were going to pay you 6 cents an acre in annuities per year for Iowa. Well, we're going to take that away if you don't send your kids to boarding schools. The boarding school we built 5 miles away. And Meskwaki said, I don't care. We're just going to grow our own food. You know, we don't need your stuff if you're going to withdraw it. That's fine. We do need our kids, though, to know our culture and our language. So I think they had 2 or 3 Meskwaki students in the years that they had that boarding school open. So they bussed in Winnebagos, Lakotas. They had the boarding school open for, I don't know. Do you know? Like maybe like 5 years or so, something around there. And then they ended up just turning it into a sanitarium for Native people during the great epidemics of the early 1900s, tuberculosis, consumption. So that's what it became. It was never a successful boarding school other than they brought in other tribes' children. So as a result, if you come to our tribe, everybody over the age of 50 is fluent in the language. 80% of the people are Meskwaki traditional religion. It's more rare for people to be not our religion. Our culture is intact. We have our clan system. Basically, you know, by right or wrong, by saying this is ours. You're not allowed to come here. We're not going to share our culture with you. You know, Meskwakis are kind of known as being pretty stingy with information. There's a great book out there called Wolf That I Am about a University of Iowa English student whose goal, his PhD, was going to be about collecting Meskwaki stories and writing them in a book. And when he came to the settlement, people were really nice to him. They fed him, they would talk to him, and every time it came time for them to tell a story, they just would give him the runaround. They would never tell him a story. And that's because in our culture, it's not appropriate even for me to tell a story that I know to my students, because only an elder tells a story when they want to, when there's snow on the ground, and usually during, it could be a grandparent telling a child the story, or it could be during ceremonies, which our kids would never talk about. Like even the smallest child would know, you don't tell that guy any stories when he comes here. So he was never going to get the story. He did actually get one made-up story involving raccoon poop or something. It was meant to teach him a lesson about how he should keep his nose out of our stories. But everybody was really nice to him, and he wrote this whole book about his adventure of trying to collect Meskwaki stories. So it's pretty hilarious. It's a book that's out there but it kind of exemplifies. As a kid, my mother grew up in boarding school. She was my grandmother. She raised me. She was Winnebago, and the thing that she said to me as a kid, I went to Cedar Falls High. She said, you're going to be maybe the only Indian kid at that school other than your little sisters, and a lot of people are going to be fascinated by you. Unlike Tama, here they're going to think you're cool. They're going to want to know all about you. And what you see in ceremonies and when you hear us, when you speak our language, that's not a circus act to entertain other people. She's like, everything was taken from us but our language, our culture, and our religion. And those are things that we keep close to us in our hearts, and we don't share those with other people. She's like, so when they ask you, just be kind and polite, but you tell them that that's not something I can share with you. And that's really just is the way that, a lot of the Meskwaki elders, responded when people wanted in on our religion. They look at Lakota, the Lakota example, for instance. Lakota people shared a lot of their stories, a lot of their religion, a lot of their ways of life with other people. And today you have the German Indianers. Have you guys ever heard of them? It's a group of hobbyists in Germany. It's like a huge fascination in Europe.
I love the West.
Yeah. So they get these manuals from the 16 and 1700s of Lakota language, and they memorize it. They learn the language according to how it was spoken 300 or 400 years ago, and they they make teepees, they buy beadwork online and have it sent, and they just, like, their whole life is like them transformed into a Lakota person in the 1800s. And every weekend, you know, they leave their jobs and go to these camps of other Indianers, and they have these, like, they have witnessed ceremonies or seen ceremonies written in books, so they replicate these ceremonies and sweats and all this other stuff. And then they travel to, like, Pine Ridge. And there have been a couple stories where they have corrected Lakota elders and said, you're not saying that right. You know, we have it, according to this anthropologist, in the 1600s. I mean, imagine somebody walking up to you and saying, no, you shouldn't say you should say thee. You should say thee. That's the correct way to say English. So it's just kind of, you know, it's just kind of something that our tribal nation doesn't do. The one thing that we've had to change, though, is being more open on our language. We have a Meskwaki Language App on Google. We teach all of our non-native teachers to speak Meskwaki and encourage them to speak Meskwaki in the classroom, because it's a choice between losing our language in our young people or keeping it close to us like we've all been taught. So, yeah. Any other questions?
You shared a resource before we went to break. Can you share that?
Oh yes, I'm sorry, gosh. So the Iowa Native Spaces, you might want to write this down, Iowa Native Spaces website will be a website that will offer tons of primary and secondary resources about the history of Iowa natives, Native history in general, and it's being constructed by the University of Iowa's History Department in conjunction with their PhD students. And it will definitely help social studies teachers in the state. The new social studies core requires the teaching of native current events and native history in 5 or 6 different areas. So it will be a huge help.